In October of 1992, Batman Returns was released for Sega Genesis. Then in May of 1993, the same game was released for Sega CD. So, what's the difference? The Sega Genesis version of Batman Returns was developed by Acme Interactive. The Sega CD version was developed by Malibu Interactive. While both versions look similar and play the same, there are some differences. The first and most obvious difference is the addition of the driving stages on the Sega CD game. They play like a shooter where you have to take out enemies within the allotted time. These levels look pretty good and really show off the power of the Sega CD. You get 4 different driving levels here, 3 with the Batmobile and 1 with a Batwater jet thing. With each of these driving levels comes some cool cutscenes. They're a bit repetitive, but they do look pretty good. Other cutscenes have been added too. The opening cinematic has been completely replaced, and the ending credits were given an update too. The layout on the options menu has also been replaced, looking like you're in the Batmobile, as opposed to the Genesis version, which is just, yeah. The game over screens are different too. They change depending on which section you die in. Another obvious difference between these two games is the soundtrack. It's been completely replaced on Sega CD. Gone are the chip tunes of the Sega Genesis, replaced with the end solo of November Rain. But seriously, these new songs rock hard. Again, these really show off the power of the Sega CD. Even some of the sound effects have been replaced. And there's even a voiceover.
You don't really think you'll win, do you?
But some things are missing. The Sega CD does have fewer tunes, so you will hear some of the stage music repeated from time to time. And you don't get any music on the title cards anymore. Other than that, both games play the same. Platforming levels are exact copies of the Genesis version. They look and play identically. I mean, can you tell which game is which? So, is the Sega CD version worth it? Yeah, I would say it was. Even though the platforming is the same, the addition of the driving stages is a nice touch. You're essentially getting the same game plus more. More gameplay, more cutscenes, a new and improved soundtrack. I mean, how cool is that? And the best part is that you get to pick the game type. You can just do the driving stages, or just do the platforming stages, or why not both? This is a great idea because the driving stages are completely different and can be a bit difficult. So if platforming's your thing, you could just stick with that. My only gripe is I do miss the Genesis music. Don't get me wrong, the new and improved soundtrack is excellent. I just wish maybe you could choose the old music or the new music. But now I'm just being picky. It's reasonably priced, so definitely give the Sega CD version of Batman Returns a go. The Amazing Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin was released for Sega Genesis in 1991. Then in 1993, the same game was released for Sega CD. Both games were developed by Technopop and Sega. So, what's the difference? One major difference on the Sega CD is the inclusion of animated cutscenes. Gone are the stills and text of the Genesis game, completely replaced by animated cutscenes. They're not amazing by any means, and are a bit laughable today.
Don't do anything I wouldn't do while I'm gone, Bubbles. And give my regards to the police.
But it's a nice break in the action, and some of these voice actors are from the old Ninja Turtles cartoon.
Good work, Spider-Man. It's a good thing you came along when you did.
Citizens of New York, it is my painful duty to make you aware.
And these cutscenes happen a lot, after every boss fight and even after the game over screen, which changes depending on how you die. And yes, you can skip the cutscenes if you want. Very helpful if you keep getting that game over screen. Another major difference between these games is the gameplay. The Sega CD game is much faster than the Genesis version. Just look how slow crawling can be. It's It's a lot easier on Sega CD too. You don't have to hold down the jump button to stick to walls anymore. Spider-Man just sticks automatically. And you can even bank around corners. Can't do that on Genesis. These improvements make you actually want to wall crawl in this game. Some exclusive special attacks were added as well, but they're a bit hard to execute. The Sega CD version also did get rid of some things. Photography for one. You no longer need to take photos to make money for web fluid. Web fluid is much more available in the Sega CD, so that's one less thing you need to worry about. Resting in your apartment is gone too, as life is more available as well. Another way the gameplay has changed is the more open world approach. The Genesis game has you move from level to level, just like any action platformer, but the Sega CD version lets you choose where you want to go, and there are many places to go on this big map of New York. The few big levels on Genesis have been replaced by many short levels on Sega CD, and the Sega CD levels have been redesigned too. Some levels are crucial to the story, but some are just there for power-ups and to collect comic books. Also included are some exclusive levels and exclusive bosses. Another major difference is the music. It's been completely replaced on Sega CD. Once again, Sega CD goes hair metal with a soundtrack by Spencer Nielsen. He previously did the music in Sonic CD and Batman Returns. There's even a track with Eric Martin from Mr. Big. The sound effects have been replaced too. Most notable is Getting Hit. On Genesis, it's just a regular hit sound effect. On Sega CD, it's Spider-Man or someone screaming. It's a bit ridiculous and reminds me of Kung Fu on NES. So, is it worth it? Absolutely. The Sega CD version improves on everything the Genesis game did. New cutscenes, improved controls, and an updated soundtrack. There's even a password system that the Genesis game doesn't have. And Spider-Man Pinball, anyone? But there are a couple of issues. One is loading. This is a big game with a lot going on, so you're going to run into loading screens a lot. They're relatively fast, but they can ruin the flow of gameplay. Another problem, and this is a big one, is the possibility of the game freezing. I got a used copy of this game, so it came with some scratches. This caused my game to freeze during some cutscenes, and I had to reset.
Take it away, another. You'll have to go to the sewer and take it away, another. You'll have to go to the sewer and take it away, another. You'll have to go to the sewer and take it away.
Let's just say it's a good thing this game has passwords. So if you buy the game used, be careful. Other than that, this is a fantastic game, much improved over the original. It's definitely the version to buy, and it's not too expensive, so definitely give this version a try. In the early 90s, Final Fight was ported from the arcade to the Super Nintendo. Then in 1993, it was ported to the Sega CD as Final Fight CD. Both of these games were developed by Capcom. So, what's the difference? Most of the differences between these games stem from the fact that the Sega CD game is just like the arcade. I'm going to say just like the arcade a lot, so drinking game? The first difference you might notice is that you can be all three characters, just like the arcade. That was quick. You're not just limited to Cody and Hagar like on the Super Nintendo, or Guy and Hagar like in Final Fight Guy, but we're not talking about that game. Another big difference is that Final Fight CD is actually 2 players, just like the arcade. The Super Nintendo game is just 1 player. The Sega CD game has the industrial level and Rolento boss fight, just like the arcade. Both were completely absent from the Super Nintendo game. The Sega CD game also has Roxy and Poison, just like the arcade. They were replaced by Sid and Billy in the Super Nintendo game, as hitting ladies was too raunchy for the Super Nintendo. But the Sega CD game did have some censorship. Roxy and Poison have longer shirts and pants when compared to the arcade. Also, Damned and Sodom were renamed Thrasher and Katana, just like the Super Nintendo game. No. And no booze for health. Both games completely replaced them. Another difference is that the Sega CD game has transitions between levels, just like the arcade. The Super Nintendo game just goes black. Another difference is the number of enemies on screen. The Super Nintendo game can only have 3, while the Sega CD game can have 4. And when you use a continue on Sega CD, you start right where you died from, just like the arcade. On Super Nintendo, you have to start all the way from the beginning of the stage. This makes the game so much harder. And when you die on Sega CD, the enemies fall and lose life when you respawn, just like the arcade. It doesn't happen on the Super Nintendo game. The Sega CD also has smoother character animations. All the characters have more frames of animation too. Music in both games is slightly different. They're the same songs, but they're arranged differently. The Sega CD game sounds mostly like the arcade. The Sega CD sounds like real instruments, while the Super Nintendo is more limited. Sound effects in both games are different too. And Hagar definitely sounds better on Sega CD. The Sega CD does have things that the arcade doesn't. The Sega CD game has a time attack mode. It's a mode where you beat up as many enemies as you can in a certain amount of time. It's pretty simple, but it does have some new backgrounds for us to look at, which is a nice touch. More areas of Metro City. The Super Nintendo game doesn't have this mode. Also, the Sega CD game does one better than even the arcade by having voiceovers in the cutscenes.
What? What happened to Jessica?
Even the mouths move when they speak.
Guy, Jessica was kidnapped.
Jessica?
It's not the best voice acting, but it's a nice addition. The Super Nintendo game uses text, just like the arcade. Yeah, sure. So, is it worth it? Definitely. The Sega CD is the better version of the game, hands down. It's almost a perfect port of the arcade game. Having all three characters in two-player mode alone makes it better than the Super Nintendo game. And all the other additions are really nice bonuses. The only real downside is that it can be a bit pricey, especially compared to the Super Nintendo game. And since the arcade game is available for cheaper too, it's hard to justify spending so much. But if you have some extra cash on you, definitely give Final Fight CD a go. Prince of Persia was released for Sega Genesis in 1993. The Sega CD version actually came out earlier in 1992. So, what's the difference? The Genesis game was published by Tengen, while the Sega CD game was published by Victor Musical Industries. One major difference you might notice right away is the graphical style. The Sega CD game looks a bit more cartoony, while the Genesis game looks more realistic. Another major difference are the anime-style cutscenes in the Sega CD game, and these are fully animated too. Well, that's a bit of a stretch. Only the mouths really move, so it's kinda cheating. But it does mean voiceovers, and these are just as glorious as you'd expect.
Foolish Sultan. You think you can return to Persia. But you're wrong.
Please return to your private quarters.
He didn't do anything wrong. Stop it!
Your destiny is by my side.
Father will never approve of that.
Come to me.
Don't touch me!
Ha 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 ha! Yeah!
Pure gold. And you gotta love the way they say
If he
Jafar.
sees us together and banish me along with Jaffa. Master Jaffa will explain later.
While Father has been away, Jaffa has banished the servants.
Jaffa!
Ha 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 ha!
Another major difference is the inclusion of music during gameplay. The Sega CD game has different music for the different levels. And it even changes during fights. The Genesis game, however, has no music during any level. or any fight. But the Sega CD game is missing music when you drink a potion, so there's that. Other differences are the ability to save on Sega CD instead of a password. You can also change the speed of movement and attack on Sega CD too. You can't do that on Genesis. You can also view how quickly you got through the levels on Sega CD. And there's some differences with the controls too. On a Sega CD, the jump button alone makes you jump straight up, while it doesn't do anything on Genesis unless you use the D-pad. And during combat, pressing up on Sega CD lets you defend. Not on Genesis. Defend is only another trigger button. I find it easier alternating between attack and defend with two hands instead of one. It's important for those tough fights. Other than that, the games are actually very similar. The layout of every level is exactly the same. This means all the puzzles and battles are identical. The only difference is the inclusion of the extra Jafar battle in the Sega CD game, which also includes another excellent cutscene.
Free the princess and leave this place forever!
Lots of cosmetic differences, but the gameplay is almost identical. So, is it worth it? I was almost going to say no, but something did make me change my mind. It's not just the inclusion of cutscenes or music that made me enjoy this game more, it was the changing of the game speed. Changing the game speed is really a game changer. One of the major flaws of the Genesis game is how slow and clunky the controls are. Every movement feels so incredibly labored. The Sega CD game felt like that too, until I changed the speed. After that, the game was so much more enjoyable. Even though I like the look of the Genesis game more, the Sega CD game definitely plays better. The music and cutscenes don't hurt either. The Sega CD game is pretty cheap too, so if you want an enjoyable version of Prince of Persia, definitely give the Sega CD game a go.
When the Sultan returns, everything will be alright.
Thank you.
The Adventures of Batman and Robin was released on Sega Genesis in 1995. That same year, another Adventures of Batman and Robin was released on Sega CD. Both games were developed by Clockwork Tortoise and published by Sega. So, what's the difference? The first difference you'll notice is that these are two completely different games. The Genesis game is a 1 to 2 player side-scrolling shooter, while the Sega CD game is a driving shooter. On Sega CD, you don't ever play as Batman or Robin, you just play as the Batmobile, or the Batwing. Bottom line, you just drive vehicles. Driving a vehicle the whole time in a Batman game? Who thought that was a good idea? Well, of course you're not just driving, you have different power-ups to shoot different things and blow stuff up. Or you could just get hit a lot. Object of the game is to either reach the goal before running out of time, or blowing up the enemy's vehicles. It's a sharp contrast from the shooter beat-em-up action of the Genesis game. So graphically, it's difficult to compare these games. They both utilize different aspects of their respective consoles. However, I will say this, the Genesis game pushes the console to the limit. It has lots of effects you don't see in 16-bit games. The Sega CD game, not so much. While it looks nice, it's not really mind-blowing. The screen is constantly moving too, so you can never really take in the scenery. And it does start to look the same after a while. I mean, 3 of the 6 stages are almost identical. The villains in the game are different too. Both games have the Joker, but that's it. The Genesis game also has Two-Face, Mad Hatter, and Mr. Freeze, while the Sega CD game has Poison Ivy, Riddler, and Clayface. Another major difference between the two games is that the Sega CD game includes fully animated cutscenes, and they look incredible, just like the 90s TV show. And it makes sense since they were produced by Warner Brothers Animation and made by Tokyo Movie Shinsha, who animated some episodes of the show. And not only did they get the look, but the voices too.
It's over, Ivy.
Everyone from the cartoon reprises their roles in this game.
The guy's been a thorn in your side for some time.
Fine, but your partner might not be so lucky.
Get your yummy, delicious popcorn!
I want that thing shot down now!
These cutscenes are definitely the highlight of the game and are often referred to as the lost episode. Another major difference is the soundtrack. The Genesis music was composed by Jesper Kyd, while the Sega CD music was composed by Berk Treisman. The Genesis game is one of my favorite soundtracks. But the Sega CD music isn't too bad either. It's exactly the kind of music you'd expect from fast-paced driving or an intense chase. And while neither game has the Batman theme from the show, the Sega CD version does come pretty close. So, is it worth it? I'd say no. The actual game itself, the part we have to drive around, isn't very good. The controls of the Sega CD game are very poor by today's standards. Your movement of the vehicle is very sluggish, and you don't really aim your weapons. You just kind of fire and hope you hit whatever's in your way. Luckily, you can just hold down the fire button so your arm won't fall off. The game is also incredibly hard. It can be very difficult to dodge obstacles in some levels. Your reflexes need to be perfect, and even then, some levels seem impossible. There's also not much variety since all you do is beat the clock or blow someone up. Not much difference between the first and last levels. Even the Batwing doesn't make much of difference. You'll know right away exactly all this game has to offer. And being only 6 levels, there's just not much here. And while the Genesis game is notorious for being difficult, it's still a lot more enjoyable than the driving in the Sega CD game. And like I said before, the cutscenes in the Sega CD game are definitely the best part. But if you really need to watch them, save yourself the hassle of playing the game and just look it up on YouTube. So if you want to play the adventures of Batman and Robin on Sega, stick with the one on Genesis.
Don't look so glum, Batman. It's all part of the game.
Bram Stoker's Dracula for Sega Genesis was developed by Psygnosis and Traveler's Tale. Bram Stoker's Dracula for Sega CD was developed by just Psygnosis. Both games were published by Sony ImageSoft. Both games were based on the movie, and both were released in 1993. So, what's the difference? You'll notice right away these are two completely different games. The Genesis version is like a typical 16-bit game, while the Sega CD game pushes the hardware to the limit. The backgrounds all look like they were pre-rendered in 3D. You can see it scroll as you move forward. There's cool sweeping shots as you enter certain rooms too. And the characters were made using digitized graphics, just like Mortal Kombat. In addition to the lush graphics are the inclusion of full motion video cutscenes taken right out of the movie. These happen between and during some levels. The Genesis game just has a book that gives you the title of each level. It's nothing like this. There is, however, no audio from the movie. You never hear anyone from the film speak. There is a narrator by the fireplace who tells the story.
Success is but a pinprick of light in a land of darkness.
Too bad he's not from the film, though. The music on Sega CD is done by Mike Clark, and it sounds pretty good. The orchestrated score goes well with the creepy atmosphere. It's completely different from the Genesis soundtrack, except for the opening. The Genesis soundtrack by Matt Furness and Andy Brock does have some sweet tunes of its own. The sound on Sega CD isn't perfect though.
I will taste your flesh. So you still pursue me. So you still pursue me, foolhardy mortal. So you still pursue me. Come, I will taste your flesh.
This game has one of the most laughable game overs ever. The gameplay is also different in the two games. The Sega game is an action platformer, while the Sega CD game is a bit simpler. The Genesis game has one button for jump, attack, and a projectile. The Sega CD game has one button to jump, one to punch, and one to kick. The Genesis game is full of platforming, taking you up, down, left, right, through various levels, while the Sega CD game has you move just right. The Sega CD game actually plays kinda like Kung Fu for the NES. Kinda. You just move in one direction, the enemies constantly swarm at you, you need to take them out with either a punch or a kick. The same, right? Okay, maybe not. There is one level on Sega CD on horseback for a little variety, but not much. Like I said, a very simple game. So, is it worth it? I can say without hesitation, no! Sure, it looks nice, but the Sega CD game is plagued with problems. Where to start? Well, the controls are awful. You move so slowly. It makes it very difficult to avoid enemies and projectiles. And the jumping is terrible too. You can't control the jump in midair, so you always jump the same distance. This means a lot of overshooting and undershooting your target. Luckily, you don't have to do it often. Attacking is poor too. You need to time your attacks early. If you don't, the enemies will be all over you. This will happen a lot. And this is the main problem really, the difficulty. This game is hard. Even though you respawn right where you die, this game is still impossible. They constantly throw enemies at you. You have no room to breathe. You move slow, you attack slow, you're gonna die a lot. Practically every enemy you encounter is gonna get a piece of you. It doesn't matter how careful you try to be. The game is pretty much the same thing over and over again. Gameplay never changes. You're always slowly walking right, trying not to die. Occasionally you can go in a different direction, but that just leads to more walking right. The horseback level is an attempt at variety, but it plays awful as well. Instead of using the D-pad to move, you need to keep tapping the A button. And while you're tapping, you need to jump over projectiles and shoot the carriage. It's not incredibly fun, but thankfully, it's short. In summation, the moving, jumping, and attacking are all terrible in the Sega CD game. The Genesis game is flawed as well, but compared to the Sega CD game, it's almost a masterpiece. The controls are much tighter, enemies aren't constantly thrown at you, and it's a much more enjoyable experience overall. So unless you feel like having a good laugh with your buddies, avoid the Sega CD game altogether. If you want to play Bram Stoker's Dracula, best to stick with the one on Sega Genesis. Mortal Kombat was ported to the Sega Genesis from the arcade in 1993. A year later, it was ported to the Sega CD. So, what's the difference? The main difference between the games is that the Sega CD version is more like the arcade. What does that mean? Well, for one, the Sega CD game doesn't need the blood code. Blood and fatalities are already in the game. The Sega CD version saves you the hassle of entering the blood code, unlike the Genesis game.
Get over here!
The Sega CD game also has better graphics than the Genesis version. The characters have more frames of animation, making it look smoother. And there are more animations and details not included in the Genesis game. But even though the Sega CD game looks better, oddly enough, both games are still not as crisp as the Super Nintendo game. You win that round, Nintendo. The Sega CD game also sounds more like the arcade. The music quality on Sega CD is essentially the same as the arcade. And if you decide just to listen to the music, you'll be treated with some bonus tunes.
Test your might. Test your might.
However, some stage music has been switched around for some reason. switched, but it still sounds good. And it's not just the music, the announcer says a lot more on Sega CD.
Sub-Zero. Scorpion wins. Fatality.
The Sega CD also has more sound effects. And overall, the Sega CD sound effects are better.
Get over here! Get over here!
One other addition is a highly pixelated version of the Mortal Monday commercial.
Test your might.
Sure, it's a little odd to see a commercial telling you to buy something that you already bought, but you can always skip it. It's not all improvements for the Sega CD game, however. Since this is an early disc-based game, you do have to go through loading times. And they happen quite often. They happen when you select a fighter, between matches, when Reptile gives you a hint, when you do a fatality, when you win the first endurance round, these are all forgivable, but the worst loading occurs during the boss of the game. Every time Shang Tsung does a shapeshift, it stops to load. Every time. Other than those mostly cosmetic differences, these games have the same tight gameplay. So, is it worth it? It's close, but I'd say yes. While the music isn't correct and loading is an issue, especially during that final boss, it still feels like the better version. The good still outweighs the bad. The Sega CD version is closer to arcade perfect in every category. The graphics, music, sound effects, and you don't need to enter the blood code. This game isn't terribly expensive either, so if you can get past the misplaced music tracks and that odd loading, definitely give the Sega CD version of Mortal Kombat a go. Mickey Mania was developed by Traveler's Tale and published by Sony ImageSoft. It was released for Sega Genesis in 1994. That same year, it was also released for the Sega CD. So, what's the difference? At first glance, these games look identical, and graphically, there isn't much difference. If you go deeper, there are things added to the Sega CD game. The first difference you might notice right away is Mickey. He's a lot more vocal in the Sega CD game.
You look awfully familiar.
Whether he's commentating on the current situation, or simply stating the name of the level.
The Mad Doctor.
Enemies are more vocal too. Overall, there's more sound effects on Sega CD.
Hiya, Mr. Goat.
Another difference is the soundtrack. It shouldn't be any surprise that the Sega CD soundtrack is of a much higher quality than the Genesis one. For some reason, on Sega CD, the songs are moved around a bit. And some songs have been completely replaced on Sega CD. Both games have practically identical gameplay, but the Sega CD version added a few things. There's a new fight against Pete at the end of the game. This fight is unique in that you call on the previous versions of Mickey you encountered to help you win. It's a nice addition and not at all in the Genesis game. And these parachute spiders aren't in the Genesis game either. There's another addition as well. When you beat the Mad Doctor on Sega CD, you see that he turns into a little baby. On Genesis, you don't. Not sure why that couldn't be included in the Genesis game, but oh well. Not all the differences are good, however. One negative feature of the Sega CD game is the loading screens. This happens between every level, every stage, so get used to seeing Mickey looking at the script. One major problem with the Super Nintendo game was the inclusion of these load screens, and the Genesis game has no load screens. Ever. Luckily, there's no load screens on Sega CD when you die, unlike the Super Nintendo game. So, is it worth it? It's close, but I'd say yes. While there are very few improvements and the loading screens are a negative, I still enjoyed this version of the game. Nothing that made the Genesis game fun was taken away, which is crucial. It's not missing the things like the Super Nintendo game is. Instead, it adds things. You have better quality music, and Mickey's increased dialogue on Sega CD is a charming addition.
Gee, I wonder who's in here. Whoa, that's one big spider.
And the new boss fight is incredibly fun too. Seeing those past Mickeys one more time, aiding you in battle, really wraps up the game nicely. It's a shame it wasn't included in the Genesis game.
Ow!
And the price of the game isn't too bad either, as long as you stick with a used copy. So if you're looking to play a version of Mickey Mania on Sega, definitely give the Sega CD game a go.
Over the water!
Earthworm Jim was released for Sega Genesis in 1994. Earthworm Jim Special Edition was released for Sega CD in 1995. So, what's the difference? Both games were developed by Shiny Entertainment. The Sega CD game was based off the Genesis version and contains all its levels. There were some additions, however. One major difference is a new level, Big Broody. With new enemies, its look and design fit perfectly with the Earthworm Jim aesthetic. Fun and inventive, fans will not be disappointed. Not only is there a new level, but the original levels have been expanded upon too, giving you even more of that Earthworm Jim experience. Another major difference is the sound. Tommy Tallarico's soundtrack has been completely remixed on Sega CD, and it sounds great. There's a couple of issues though. The music does stop and restart in the middle of some stages. This also happens if you pause for too long. The voiceovers have been improved, however. There's more of them and they sound more clear.
Sharp! I'm a rocket man. I'm nude. I win!
Speaking of sound, the Sega CD game also has multiple endings, and voiceovers play a big part of them. The ending depends on which difficulty you beat the game. Beating the game on normal gives you practically the same ending like the Genesis game, with updated animations. But if you beat the game on easy or difficult, you're treated to some hilarious voiceovers. They take full advantage of the CD format as you get these long, yet entertaining voiceover endings.
If you ever feel bad about yourself, think about this day and what you're hearing right now. You are the best!
I usually hate when games tell you to play a higher difficulty to see the real ending, but even that ending had me laughing out loud.
Forms that show certain evolutionary advancements over other, evolutionary. Now we're all just pro-evolution.
If you've never heard these endings before, definitely check them out. Not only is the ending different, but you also get a newly animated intro as well. Graphically, the game pretty much maintains the look of the original. Some character animations are different when you're idle though. Apparently over 1,000 frames of animation were added, but I think that was mostly the intro, the ending, and the new enemies. Gameplay is mostly the same with a couple of additions. First off, a new weapon, homing missiles. These heat seekers would also be used in the sequel. Another new addition is a password system. You no longer need to beat the game in one shot. More cheats have also been added to give Jim even more ridiculous looks. Of course, you do get loading screens, but that's expected. They happen between every stage and can be a bit lengthy. At least the loading screens between levels give you pictures of characters. So, is it worth it? Yes, yes, and yes. The special edition is easily the best version of the first Earthworm Jim game, and the loading screens do not ruin it. You kept everything that was great with the original, and gave you even more. It's upsetting that when the game was re-released in HD, they went with the Genesis version instead of this. It would have been amazing to play this game in HD without all the loading screens. And this game is not cheap, so emulator's probably your best bet. If you want the best Earthworm Jim experience, definitely give the Sega CD game a go.
Pronounce that it's the end. We're not kidding. Really?
Mega Man was developed by Capcom and released on the NES in 1987. Mega Man Powered Up was developed by Capcom and released on the PSP in 2006. So, what's the difference? The first difference you'll notice is the graphics. The pixels are gone and everything is rendered in 3D. Powered Up not only has 3D graphics, but it also has more details. Backgrounds are no longer just solid colors, but fully fleshed out environments. The character animation is incredibly fluid as well. The designs of the characters are changed slightly too. They were given a chibi style overhaul, smaller limbs and bigger head. This is actually what series creator Keiji Inafune had planned when designing the original game, but hardware constraints forced him to do otherwise. It's a bit cutesy, and I'd prefer the art to match the original game more, but this style did grow on me after a while. Another difference is the sound. The soundtrack has been given a complete remix. Some tracks have lost their intensity, but other tracks have been improved. Overall, the new music matches the art style well. The sound effects have also been updated to better match the art style. One major addition is voiceovers.
Cutman, what's going on?
All the characters now have dialogue and newly added cutscenes. They mostly occur before boss battles and give everyone more backstory.
You should have come the day before yesterday. I had some big boom booms then.
Okay, it's a bit ridiculous, but it can be charming too. My favorite character is Iceman and his multiple personalities.
Well, sir, Soldier, finish your mission! Stop and free!
If you don't like the cutscenes, don't worry. You can easily skip past them. The gameplay has changed a lot too. Most notably, the inclusion of 2 new robot masters, Time Man and Oil Man. They've been given fully realized levels and powers. Time Man can slow down time, and Oil Man gives you an oil attack which you can slide on. The Robot Master weaknesses have been recalibrated to incorporate these new powers as well. Another difference is that even the levels have been remixed. Levels have been completely redesigned and are much longer. Multiple flag checkpoints have been included to accommodate for these longer levels. There are 3 difficulties for every stage: easy, normal, and hard. The higher difficulty removes platforms, increases the enemies. The difficulty is selected every time you pick a stage. If you like the original level designs, good news, there's an option to play those as well. The game lets you choose new style or old style right from the start. The old style has you up against the original 6 Robot Masters in their original levels. You also get the old 8-bit soundtrack in all its glory. There's also no cutscenes here. The Magnet Beam is only available in this mode too, not the new style. This is a nice addition. However, the old style screen is smaller to match the original game's screen ratio. It can strain the eyes a little. There were also some small changes made to gameplay. You can no longer shoot through walls, but enemies can't either. Spikes don't kill you if you fall on them after being hit, which only happened in the first game. And every time you die, your weapons get generously refilled. This happens at any difficulty. It's also generous with lives. You always start every level with at least 2 lives. Even if you beat the stage with 1 or no lives left, you start the next stage with 2 lives. You also get to save your game now, unlike the original, which didn't even have passwords. There are lots of small additions as well. There's a new intro level, much like in 7, 8, or the X games. The Robot Masters also have a new powered up attack they can use. You can switch between the Robot Master's weapons using the shoulder buttons. The weapons also have a counter above the energy bar. Another addition is being able to actually play as all 8 Robot Masters. If you beat a Robot Master with just the Mega Buster, they become playable. They have their own storylines, they can access areas Mega Man can't, and in a nice twist, Mega Man is a Robot Master you fight. It's a bit more difficult too, since they don't get any new powers. But it's a nice addition, and you can switch to them anytime between stages. You can also play as Mega Man with a slide and charge attack. There's other characters too. You can play as Roll in one of her many outfits, and you can even play as Proto Man. There were not only additions to the main game, but new game modes as well. One is a challenge mode. This is made up of 100 short challenges for Mega Man and all 8 Robot Masters. It really takes advantage of everyone's unique powers. Another new mode is construction. This is a level building mode. You can build fully customized levels. You need to find construction packs spread throughout the game for building materials. This construction mode also has online capabilities. It's connected with the Mega Man web. And even though this game came out in 2006, as of 2019, the website is still up. That means you can upload any levels that you finish to the website. But if level building isn't your thing, then you can just download levels other people created. There are special downloads too. The ability to play as Roll and Proto Man are here. There's even a Ghosts and Goblins pack. So, is it worth it? Absolutely. The first Mega Man game has always been the outlier of the series. It's difficult and it's not as polished as the other games. Powered Up fixes that. You're allowed to pick your difficulty, but even hard isn't that difficult. You have new level designs and the controls are incredibly tight. Then there's a plethora of additions. New Robot Masters, playable Robot Masters, challenge modes, construction mode, and downloads of levels, unlockable characters, and unique construction packs. I know the cutesy art style isn't for everyone, but if you can get past that, you'll play the definitive version of the first Mega Man. It's pretty cheap too, so if you want to play the best version of the first game, give Mega Man Powered Up a go.
You should have come the day before yesterday. I had some big boom booms then.
Demolition Man was released for Sega Genesis and Sega CD in 1995, Both games were developed by Acclaim and Alexandria Entertainment. Side by side, these games look identical. So, what's the difference? The first major difference you'll notice are the cutscenes. In between many of the Sega CD levels are clips right from the movie, dialogue and all.
Send a maniac to catch me.
The only place a person can even view a gun in this city is at a museum.
Oh no!
They make the one cutscene from the Genesis unnecessary. They're also a step up from that Super Nintendo exclusive ending. The next major difference is the music. The tracks from the Genesis game have been redone for more of that Sega CD quality. Not only is the quality different, but some songs have been replaced entirely, and these new songs are pretty good. Again, showing off the power of the Sega CD hardware, some songs include voiceovers.
Bio-prisoner defrosting reanimation. Welcome to the San Angeles Museum of History.
However, in a weird twist of fate, the Sega CD game actually has a Super Nintendo exclusive track. The music quality is improved, two tracks are cut short. The Rooftop and Zipline songs loop every 30 seconds. It can be a little annoying, especially since the song on the Rooftop is so good. The voiceovers suffer too, as there's fewer of them in the Sega CD game.
I'm a man! Bad aim, Blondie.
That might be forgivable though, since the cutscenes do have lots of dialogue.
Are all fluid transfer activities like this?
Other than that, these games are identical. They look and play exactly the same. There's also loading times, of course, but that's to be expected. Major differences between these games are the cutscenes and music. So, is it worth it? It really depends. If you don't own the Genesis game, sure, buy the Sega CD game. But these games are too similar to justify owning both, especially considering how much more the Sega CD game costs compared to the Genesis version. While the new music is really good, unless you need to see pixelated cutscenes from a 26-year-old movie, just stick with the Genesis version.
Heads up!
Samurai Showdown was released for the Sega Genesis by Takara in 1994. It was released for the Sega CD by JVC Musical Industries and Funcom in 1995. So, what's the difference? The first difference you'll notice is the opening cutscene. The Sega CD retains the opening from the arcade, while the Genesis game doesn't. The Sega CD game has all the cutscenes from the arcade, like the post-fight scenes. Genesis just adds text to the gameplay. Sega CD has in-game cutscenes too, while the Genesis doesn't. Plus, the cutscenes on Sega CD do look better in general. Another difference you'll notice is the sound. The Sega CD has a voiceover for the opening, again like the arcade. Sega CD also has a few extra voiceovers, like when announcing the names of fighters. You can also hear things in the background, like fire, water, or nature. The Genesis has none of this. The soundtrack has also been given an upgrade on Sega CD. While the audio quality is improved, some of those voiceovers are still a bit distorted. When it comes to graphics, the colors of the Sega CD look more vibrant. The Sega CD looks sharper and has more detail. The Sega CD background also tends to have more effects, whether it's rain on this level, fire in this level, or a cool sky here. Most levels do look better on Sega CD, but not all of them. Look at this level on Genesis. Snow is falling and you see lots of shadows in the ground, giving it depth. On Sega CD, no snowfall, no shadows. Both games have the cropped look, but Sega CD is a little more cropped, so the characters do look bigger. And it barely shows the black barred lines, unlike the Genesis game. The Sega CD also has more blood than the Genesis. You see it after every hit. The Genesis instead has the screen flash red. You also see lots of blood spray after some Sega CD victories. The Genesis doesn't have that. Instead, it lets you chop some bodies in half, which is pretty cool too. When it comes to gameplay, they feel the same. Both games have slowdown, but the Sega CD has a little less, so it's a little smoother. It should be noted that both games are missing Earthquake, as he was too big since both these games are cropped. So it seems like the Sega CD has a lot more than the Genesis game, but it's also missing many features. First off, the Sega CD is missing the official, Kuroku. He's not in the game at all. He's in every level of the Genesis game, following the fight and waving his flags. Another character missing is Hikyaku, the guy giving out items. There he is on Genesis. Even though he's missing on Sega CD, you will still see some items come from out of nowhere. Another thing missing on Sega CD is the destructible environments. Being able to destroy objects as you face your opponent is completely missing from the Sega CD. And while the Sega CD game does have more voiceovers, it's still missing some. When a match starts on Genesis, you hear a voiceover. Nothing on Sega CD. When a match ends, you get more voiceovers on Genesis. Again, nothing on Sega CD. Those drums and voiceover are really satisfying to hear when a match ends. Let's talk about some smaller details. Let's look at the life bars. When the life bar is low on Genesis, it flashes red. It doesn't flash or change color at all on Sega CD. Another small detail is the button smash icon that pops up when the weapons collide on Genesis. Once again, it's missing completely from Sega CD. While it doesn't change anything, it's still fun to look at. The versus modes are different too. Both games have a regular versus mode, but the Genesis has an exclusive showdown mode. This lets you prepare multiple fighters in a row. It's missing completely from the Sega CD game. Then we have the regular versus mode in both games. They seem similar, but the Genesis game has more features. When you select the fighters on Genesis, you get to control the strength, time, frequency of items, and select the level. You can't do any of that on Sega CD. The Genesis game also gives you battle stats after each battle. Again, completely missing from Sega CD. Also, you get to play as Makuza on the Genesis in both versus modes. Can't play as him on Sega CD. Makuza is there, you can see his face in the character select, but you're not allowed to play as him. And I couldn't find any cheat codes for Sega CD either. Don't know why he's there. The Sega CD also does something weird after a versus mode match. Instead of immediately going to character select, it makes you select the characters right there. Makes you scroll through the names one at a time until you find your character. And if you take too much time, then it just selects for you. Just go to the character select like the Genesis game. One major difference in both games is the continues. The Genesis game gives you unlimited continues. So how many does the Sega CD game give? 3. That's it. Are you kidding me? Why did they change it? Plus the Sega CD game is really hard. Even on the easy difficulty, you'd be hard pressed to beat the game with only 3 continues. It makes a difficult game so much more frustrating. I definitely don't agree with that decision. And of course, I can't talk about a Sega CD game without talking about the loading. You see this disc access screen a lot. You see it when you select your difficulty, before a match starts, after a match is over, after the post-fight cutscene, after using continue, a lot. You see this loading screen a lot. And they are pretty long. So, is it worth it? I'd say no. While the Sega CD made some small improvements to graphics, sound, and even gameplay, it's just missing too much. This game came out a year after the Genesis version. Why is it missing so many features? Small improvements aren't worth the many missing features, poor versus mode, limited continues, and long loading times. I mean, maybe if it's cheap enough, it could... Nope, it's not. A lot cheaper on Genesis. So if you want to play Samurai Showdown on Sega, just stick with the one on Genesis.
Oh, buddy!
NBA Jam was developed by Midway Manufacturing and Iguana Entertainment. It was released for Sega Genesis in 1994. That same year it was released for the Sega CD. So, what's the difference? Even though there's not much that's different between these games, the first difference you'll notice is the sound. The soundtrack was given an upgrade on the Sega CD. Not only was the music given an upgrade, but voiceovers as well.
Welcome to NBA Jam!
Welcome to NBA Jam!
Ugly Doc heating up!
He's heating up! He's on fire! He's on fire!
And there's more of them on Sega CD.
Tonight's matchup, Bulls versus Mavericks. NBA Jam halftime report. Altitude with an attitude.
Another difference is the halftime report. On Genesis, it's always the same videos. The Sega CD not only takes advantage of the full motion video, but it changes the halftime report videos depending on your team. Another noticeable change is the roster. Many players have been swapped in the Sega CD game. The most notable character missing from Sega CD is Charles Barkley. Midway lost the rights to his likeness due to Accolade making Barkley shut up and jam. The last major difference between the games is the hidden characters. The Genesis has 12, while the Sega CD game has 28. Sega CD has all the hidden characters from the Genesis, except Scruff. Sorry, Scruff. But the Sega CD game does have more developers, and it also has 3 dinosaurs. So if you ever wanted to slam dunk as a Velociraptor, here you go. There are, of course, loading times. They occur between each quarter, but that's expected of these Sega CD games. And it's still loading. So, is it worth it? It's close, but I'd say yes. At first glance, they're almost identical. They pretty much look the same, they have the exact same gameplay, and the exact same cheat codes. And you can still have 4 players with the multi-tap, which I didn't even talk about. While there's not much the Sega CD game does to improve the Genesis version, it still is a step up. The music is better, it has more voiceovers, better voiceovers, more halftime report footage, and more hidden characters. At least it's not missing anything that the Genesis game has. Except Scruff. Sorry, Scruff. And on the plus side, it's still pretty cheap. So if you want to play NBA Jam on Sega, give the Sega CD game a go. Mortal Kombat 2 was released for the Sega Genesis on September 13th, 1994. Later that year it was released for the 32X. Both versions were ported by Probe Entertainment. So, what's the difference? You'll notice the first difference right when you turn the game on. After the list of developers, the Genesis game goes right to the title screen. After the developers on 32X, you get an opening cutscene. It sums up the events of the previous game and tells us where we are now. This is not in the Genesis version at all. The 32X game also contains character bios. Again, they're not in the Genesis version. The ending has been changed as well. The Genesis version just has text scroll up over the gameplay. The 32X version gives you a nice picture of your character with their story. The 32X game also has these sweet title cards in versus mode. It shows you where the next fight is and even your wins if you're on a streak. Again, this is missing from the Genesis version. Another major difference is in the sound department, mostly the voiceovers. The announcer talks a lot more in the 32X game.
Melina wins. Fatality.
All the character names and more details in the match are said, unlike the Genesis game.
Reptile. Round 2, fight. Fight.
Also, grunting noises are more prominent and clear on 32X. There's a lot more of them as well. Even though the sound effects were upgraded, I didn't notice any change with the music. It seems to retain the same soundtrack from the Genesis. Another noticeable difference is the graphics. The 32X game is a lot more colorful, and it looks brighter. The shadows of the characters on 32X are shaped like the people, instead of the circles like on Genesis. I didn't really notice any difference with the characters' animations though. There are also many details that the 32X game has that the Genesis game is missing. The 32X game has more hanging chains on this level, it has the flying creatures in the sky here, it has this floating guy, you can actually see the lava flowing on this stage, and the people actually move in the background of this level. Plus, when you fight a secret character on Genesis, they just make this level blue. On 32X, you fight in Goro's lair from the first game. A few more details are the text. It flashes on 32X, for fight, finish him or her, and when the character wins. None of them flash on Genesis. The HUD also looks a bit sharper on 32X. It's much bigger and the character names are easier to read. Gameplay is the one thing that didn't change. You have all the same characters with all the same moves, and you have your secret characters too. There's a tiny difference with Shao Kahn. On Genesis, it says fight, then you begin.
We'll die, fight. You will die.
On 32X, it doesn't say fight, it just starts.
You will die. You will die.
There's also a slight difference with the cheat codes. Both games have this test mode, however, 32X is missing a couple things. The Oh Nasty is gone. That's a reference to Raiden's Frugality move that can only be done on this level. Also gone in the 32X is this cartoon toasty when you use the test mode cheat. So, is it worth it? I'd have to say yes. Even though it didn't do anything drastically different, it's still much closer to the arcade than the Genesis game. It has character bios and a cutscene for the intro and ending. It has improved sound with clearer voiceovers and has more voice samples. It improved on the graphics with better use of color and included many elements missing in the Genesis game. Sure, it's missing a couple of cheats, but it's not going to ruin the whole experience. And yes, the Super Nintendo game already has most of these features, so it does feel like Sega is playing catch up. I do wish the 32X game had some exclusives, but at least it's a step up from the Genesis game. It can be a bit pricey though. So, if you want to play Mortal Kombat 2 on the Sega, give the 32X game a go. And special thanks to Bubba Ace for his donation of the 32X game.
Fatality.
If you want to see a comparison to the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis versions of Mortal Kombat 2, check out this Console Wars video. Brandish was released for the Super Nintendo by Koei in 1995. The PSP game, Brandish Star Revenant, was released by Nihon Falcom in 2015. Though there are multiple versions of the game, these are the only 2 North American releases. So, what's the difference? The first difference you'll notice between these action RPGs is the graphics. The PSP game has been given a complete 3D overhaul. Characters have been redesigned or replaced completely. The NPCs have been redesigned too. The layout of the levels are the same for the most part, but they have more detail on PSP, and the screen is cropped on PSP as well. The next difference you'll notice is the gameplay. The Super Nintendo version has this immediate change in perspective every time you turn. Every time. It can be confusing and a major reason most people won't play the game. It takes some time getting used to, and even then it can still be frustrating. It can be interesting for exploration, as some items and objects can only be viewed from the right angle, but it's more bad than it is good. The PSP version fixes that by having the screen gradually move with you as you turn. No more confusion as to where you are, no more confusion as to which way you're facing. This was a major improvement. And so is the map. On PSP, you have a map on screen during gameplay. This makes it so much easier to keep track of where you are. It also lets you know where a change occurs when you hit a switch. On Super Nintendo, to see the map, you need to keep pressing start, which can be tedious and slow down the action. The PSP game also has a map when you pause, but it has more details. And even more changes were made to the PSP map. In both games, the map becomes visible as you walk in that area. The PSP game improves on this by giving you a percentage of how much of the map you've completed. And to sweeten the deal, every time you complete a floor at 100%, you get a well-deserved reward. It really encourages you to explore the map in the PSP game. You don't have any of that on Super Nintendo. You can also alter parts of the map on PSP, if you want to remember where something is. To be fair though, the Super Nintendo map does show unopened doors, and this can be really useful to remember where a locked door is. You'd have to mark it on the PSP, as the unopened doors don't appear on the map. The PSP game also simplifies the controls. To turn in the Super Nintendo game, you have to use the D-pad. To strafe, you need to hold L or R while using the D-pad. The PSP simplifies that by making the straight the default with the D-pad. To turn, you just use L or R. No D-pad necessary here. Basically, you need 2 buttons to do something on the Super Nintendo that only takes 1 button on PSP. There's some major changes to the gameplay as well. Let's start with the items. In the Super Nintendo game, you can only have 1 item ready to use. Otherwise, you need to open your menu. On the PSP, you have 3 items ready for use. Both games have dimensional boxes or otherworld boxes that let you carry more items. On Super Nintendo, if an item is in this box, you can't use it. First you need to transfer it out of the box and then you can use it. On PSP, you can use an item no matter what box it's in. Another difference is the inspector tool. It's used by holding L or R on Super Nintendo. It lets you read things, examine oddities, and talk to people. The inspector tool is gone on PSP. This is fine because items are no longer in bags, and you can read, examine, and talk with the triangle button. Another change is the saving. Every time you change floors in Super Nintendo, it automatically saves. Even if you fall down a hole, it saves. On PSP, new floors just act as new checkpoints. So if you take a long trip for nothing, you can just load from your last save. And the Super Nintendo game only has 2 save slots, while the PSP has as many as you want. Some changes were made to the enemies too. First off, enemies and bosses have life bars on PSP. No more guessing if the enemy is almost dead. Enemies also respawn a lot more in the Super Nintendo game. This makes it easier to gain levels and improve your stats, but it makes exploration harder and will certainly cost you weapons. Enemies do respawn occasionally on PSP, but it's a lot more exploration friendly. Boss battles have changed slightly too. On Super Nintendo, most bosses can be taken out with brute force if you're strong enough. On PSP, bosses have weaknesses or patterns you need to figure out. You need strategy on the PSP game. The boss of the game also has 2 forms, not just one like the Super Nintendo game. The menu is also cleaner on PSP. You can access everything easily. There's not really a menu on Super Nintendo. Instead, you scroll through all these options. So if you want to save, you always have to scroll through these other menus. The story has been slightly changed too, but it's not really a driving factor in either game. The names of the characters in certain locations were changed too. In the Super Nintendo, the names were changed from the original. The PSP game changed the names back to what they were in the PC games. Varric is now Eris, and Alexis is now Della. The PSP game removed some censorship as well. The Super Nintendo changed the sorceress's outfit by covering her up in a one-piece. The PSP changes it back to the original bikini design, because we all know bikinis are better for magic. One thing is missing from the remake. The Super Nintendo game has an exclusive sound room. You can listen to any track or sound effect from the game. On PSP, it's been replaced by a casino, so gamble to your heart's content and earn exclusive items. Speaking of music, the soundtrack on PSP has been completely redone. PSP game also lets you play with the updated soundtrack or the old 8-bit version. This even carries over to the cutscenes. The PSP version also has additional gameplay. After you beat the game, you can play it again as the sorceress, Della. You have whole new maps, new puzzles, and a good amount of difficulty. Overall, a nice solid addition. So, is it worth it? Absolutely. Fixing the change of perspective alone makes the PSP game better, and improvements to the map really solidifies it. It's so much easier to keep track of where you are on the PSP game. Then you have all these other improvements, the graphics, a bunch of small improvements to gameplay, the updated soundtrack, and a whole additional gameplay mode. It's a win for the PSP in every category. The Super Nintendo game is still interesting to play. The change in perspective really makes the game unique, but it's not easily approachable. If you played the Super Nintendo game and didn't like it, the PSP game fixes everything. So if you want to try out Brandish, do yourself a favor and give Brandish Dark Revenant a go.